If you're watching this video, tell me where you're from or what time it is for you. The fork trembled in my hand as I stared across the dining table. 7 days since Martha's funeral. 7 days of expecting comfort from the children we'd raised, loved, sacrificed for. Instead, Perry leaned back in his chair like he owned the place. "Harold," his voice cut through the silence, sharp as winter wind. "We need to talk." Sienna wouldn't meet my eyes. My daughter, who used to climb into my lap during thunderstorms, now fidgeted with her wedding ring like it burned her finger. The roast beef I'd prepared grew cold between us. "What's on your mind, son?" The word felt foreign. Perry had never been a son to me, just the man who'd stolen my little girl's heart 12 years ago. "This house." He gestured around our dining room, the room where Martha had hosted countless family dinners, where Sienna had blown out birthday candles, where memories lived in every corner. "It's too big for one person." My chest tightened. "I've lived here 23 years. "Exactly." Perry's smile held no warmth. "Time for a change. Sienna and we need space, real space, not that cramped apartment we're stuck in." I looked to my daughter, searching for the compassion I'd raised her with. She stared at her plate like it held the secrets of the universe. "Sienna?" My voice cracked. She finally lifted her head. Those blue eyes, Martha's eyes, looked through me like I was already gone. "Perry's right, Dad. This place it's too much for you now." The words hit harder than any physical blow. Too much. As if 23 years of mortgage payments, of maintaining every inch of this home for my family, meant nothing. As if I was some burden to be managed. "Where exactly do you expect me to go?" I set down my fork before it could betray more of my shock. Perry leaned forward, a predator sensing weakness. "Senior living, assisted care, somewhere appropriate for your age." "Appropriate?" I repeated the word, tasting its bitterness. "Dad, you're 67. Sienna's voice carried forced patience, like she was explaining simple math to a child. "Mom's gone. You shouldn't be rattling around this big house alone." Rattling around. Like I was some loose part in a machine that needed fixing. Perry stood, pacing to the window that overlooked Martha's rose garden. "Look, Harold, we're being practical here. You sell this place. Downsize to something manageable. Everyone wins." Everyone wins. The phrase echoed in my head. Everyone except the man who'd built this life brick by brick. "You could have a nice little apartment." Sienna's words rushed together now. Rehearsed lines delivered poorly. "No maintenance, no worries. Freedom." They were repackaging exile as liberation. I studied my daughter's face, searching for traces of the girl who'd once defended injured birds, who'd cry if she accidentally stepped on flowers. That girl had vanished, replaced by this stranger wearing her features. And if I refuse? Silence stretched between us like a taut wire. Perry returned to his seat, straightening his shoulders like a man preparing for battle. "Dad," Sienna's voice hardened. "Don't make this more difficult than it needs to be." Perry cleared his throat, the sound sharp in the quiet room. His next words landed like hammer blows on glass. "Now that your wife is dead, grieve, pack your suitcases and never come back." The brutality of it stole my breath. Martha, reduced to your wife. Dead. Pack. Never come back. Each word calculated to wound. I waited for Sienna to gasp, to protest, to show some fragment of the daughter I'd raised. Instead, she nodded. "Perry's right, Dad. It's time." Something inside me crystallized in that moment. Not broke. Crystallized. like water freezing into something harder, colder, more purposeful. I stood slowly, my legs steadier than they'd been in days. "Aunts, I see." 2 words. That's all I managed. 2 words that held 38 years of marriage, 23 years in this house, and 7 days of grief they'd weaponized against me. I walked to the hallway closet and pulled on my jacket. Behind me, Perry's voice carried smugness like cologne. "Smart choice, Harold. We'll help you look at places tomorrow." I didn't respond. The door closed behind me with a soft click that seemed to echo through my chest. The evening air bit at my face as I stood on my own front porch, my house, my life, my former family. I walked to my car, each step measured and deliberate. As I drove away, I didn't look in the rearview mirror. I was done looking backward. If you're watching this video, tell me where you're from or what time it is for you. Back in my study, I cleared the dinner plates with mechanical precision. Sienna and Perry had left 20 minutes ago, their car doors slamming like gunshots in the quiet evening. Now silence pressed against the walls of my house. Our house. Martha's and mine. I sank into the leather armchair that had been my refuge for 15 years. The graduation photo on my desk caught the lamplight. Sienna at 22, radiant in cap and gown, her arms wrapped around Martha and me. $89,000. That's what her education cost me. Every semester, every textbook and meal plan, I transferred the money gladly, watching my savings shrink as my daughter's future expanded. When they called her name, Martha squeezed my hand so tight her wedding ring pressed into my palm. Afterward, Sienna had thrown her arms around my neck, tears streaming down her face. "I can't believe you did this for me, Dad," she'd sobbed. "You gave me everything. I promise I'll take care of you and Mom when you're older. Family takes care of family." Family takes care of family. The words echoed now like a cruel joke. 5 years later, she'd needed another bailout, $65,000 for a house down payment. She and Perry couldn't qualify for the mortgage alone. "We'll pay you back, Dad. Every dollar with interest," she'd promised, her desperation real. I'd written the check the next morning. 2 years ago, their wedding. $23,000 for the country club reception. During the father-daughter dance, Sienna had whispered in my ear, "Thank you for everything, Dad, for making this perfect. I'm so lucky to have you." Perfect? The word tasted bitter now. I walked to the filing cabinet where I kept financial records. Martha had always teased me about my meticulous bookkeeping, but numbers don't lie. College, $89,000. House down payment, $65,000. Wedding, $23,000. Smaller loans over the years for cars, emergencies, Perry's failed business startup, another $38,000. The total, $215,000. Nearly 2/3 of my life savings poured into my daughter's happiness. My phone buzzed against the desk. A text from Sienna. "Thanks for understanding, Dad. This is really for the best. We'll help you find a nice place tomorrow." Understanding. As if being ordered from my own home was reasonable behavior. I stared at the phone until the screen went dark. Something cold was settling in my chest, replacing the hurt with something harder, more focused. They thought they knew Harold Butler, the generous father, the grieving widower, the easy mark. They'd calculated wrong. Dawn found me staring at the ceiling, Martha's pillow still indented beside me. Sleep had been impossible. By 7 a.m., I'd showered, dressed in my best navy suit, the one I'd worn to client meetings for 23 years, and made a decision. Desert Community Bank sat in downtown Scottsdale, like a fortress of glass and steel. I'd worked in this building until my retirement 3 years ago. Harold Butler, the receptionist's smile was genuine. Here to see someone. James Morrison, if he's available. Tell him it's about a financial consultation. 20 minutes later, I sat across from James in his corner office. He had been my colleague for 15 years, a careful man with an eye for detail. You look well, Harold, he said, pouring coffee. Though I was sorry to hear about Martha. Thank you, James. I accepted the cup. I need to understand my financial exposure on some loans I guaranteed. James's expression shifted to professional alertness. Of course. Which accounts are you concerned about? My daughter's mortgage and anything related to my son-in-law's business ventures. Fingers danced across his keyboard. James pulled up files that made his eyebrows rise incrementally. Well, since you co-signed on Sienna's original mortgage and the home equity line, I can certainly discuss your liability. Home equity line? I hadn't known about that one. The mortgage payments have been irregular for 8 months, James continued, scrolling through data. Currently 60 days behind. That puts your credit rating at risk. 60 days. My chest tightened. What about Perry's business accounts? James's pause told me everything before he spoke. The equipment loan you guaranteed for Morgan Construction Services defaulted 4 months ago. $78,000 in principal plus accumulated interest and fees. $78,000? I set down my coffee cup carefully. Harold, I have to ask, are you aware of their current financial situation? Apparently not as aware as I should be. The home equity line was maxed out 6 months ago. $45,000 drawn against the property, combined with the mortgage arrears and Perry's business default. James leaned forward. Your liability exposure is significant. Over $120,000 if they continue defaulting. The numbers hit like physical blows. They'd not only burned through my money, they'd borrowed against it and failed to pay that back too. There's more. James's voice dropped. My Perry filed for business bankruptcy 2 weeks ago. It protects him from creditors, but your guarantees remain active. 2 weeks ago. Right around the time they'd started planning their ambush. James, hypothetically speaking, if these accounts went into full default, what would happen to the property? Foreclosure proceedings within 90 days, the house would be sold to satisfy the debts. He calculated quickly. There might be $10,000 to $15,000 equity remaining after all liens are satisfied. $10,000 from a house I'd put $65,000 down on. Standing, I shook James's hand. I appreciate your candor. This gives me the information I need. Harold, James stopped me at the door. If you need any documentation of these accounts for legal purposes, I can prepare a comprehensive liability report. That would be very helpful. Thank you. Walking to my car, my steps felt different, purposeful. Sienna and Perry thought they'd cornered a grieving old man. Instead, they'd awakened something much more dangerous. A former banking analyst who now understood exactly how precarious their position really was. The afternoon sun slanted across my desk as I spread out the documents James had prepared. 3 hours since leaving the bank, and my methodical banker's mind was finally taking control. I'd arranged the papers chronologically. Loan agreements, payment histories, default notices, a timeline of financial disaster. The story these documents told was worse than I'd imagined. Perry's construction business had collapsed 6 months ago, not gradually, catastrophically. A $50,000 equipment loan had become $78,000 with penalties and compound interest. He'd used personal credit cards to keep the business afloat, turning family money into gambling chips. 4 different cards, $23,000 in revolving debt. But it was the mortgage situation that revealed their true desperation. Sienna's house, the one I'd provided a $65,000 down payment for, was 3 months behind on payments. Foreclosure proceedings could begin in 60 days. Then there was the home equity line of credit I'd never known about, maxed out at $45,000. They'd borrowed against the house to cover Perry's business debts, then borrowed more to cover the borrowing. I leaned back in my chair, watching dust motes dance in the sunlight. The numbers painted a picture of people drowning in debt. They needed my house. Not wanted, needed. Their cramped apartment wasn't a preference. It was all they could afford. My phone buzzed. A text from Sienna. "Dad, we found a lovely assisted living place in Tempe. Much more appropriate than that big empty house. Can we schedule a tour tomorrow?" Much more appropriate. The clinical language couldn't mask the urgency. They weren't thinking about my comfort. They were calculating square footage against their survival. I stood, walking to the filing cabinet where Martha and I had kept important papers. My liability exposure was staggering. If Perry's business debts went to judgment, creditors could pursue me for the full amount. But liability worked both ways. As co-signer, I had legal rights. Rights they'd never expected me to exercise. I sat back down at my desk, pulling the business loan documents closer. The default was clear, the penalties obscene. But something else bothered me. A series of 4 small transfers made from the business account just before it collapsed, all listed under a generic transaction code. External Vendor Payment, SVC91B. 35 years in banking trains you to see patterns. SVC1B wasn't a standard code for any domestic supplier. It was an old flag, one we used to see in the early days of online transactions. It flagged transfers to certain overseas payment processors, often linked to industries the banks preferred not to deal with directly. Opening my laptop, I ran a search through an old private database of financial transaction codes I still had access to. My fingers typed out the query. The result came back in seconds, a single line of text that made the air in the room grow cold. SVC91B, transaction code for Royal Spades International NV. Curaçao. Royal Spades International was not a concrete supplier or an equipment leasing company. It was one of the largest offshore online gambling sites in the world. Perry hadn't just run his business into the ground. He had siphoned loan money, money I had guaranteed, and wired it to a casino. It wasn't just gross negligence anymore. It was criminal fraud. Wire fraud, to be specific. The documents James had given me weren't just leverage. They were proof of a felony. I printed the specific transfer records, the digital receipts showing the funds moving from Desert Vista Construction LLC to an untraceable gambling account. This changed everything. I didn't wait for their call. The next afternoon, I drove to their cramped apartment complex. The building itself seemed to sag with the weight of unpaid bills and broken dreams. I knocked on their door, my knuckles rapping against the cheap, hollow wood. Perry opened it. The surprise on his face was quickly replaced by a guarded scowl. "Harold, what are you doing here?" "We need to talk," I said, stepping past him into their small living room. Sienna was on the couch, surrounded by papers. She looked up, startled. "Dad, is everything okay?" "No," I said, my voice calm and level. "Everything is not okay. I spent yesterday reviewing some financial documents, specifically the loans I co-signed for you." Perry's face paled. Sienna looked from him to me, confused. "The loans? What about them?" "I found some irregularities," I continued, my eyes locked on Perry. "Serious irregularities with the Morgan construction business account. Funds that were not used for their intended purpose. I didn't mention the gambling. Not yet. I wanted him to sweat. He licked his lips. I don't know what you're talking about. Business is complicated. It is, I agreed, which is why I've taken the liberty of drafting a repayment agreement. I placed a single document on their coffee table. This outlines a schedule for you to repay the $78,000 business loan you defaulted on, directly to me. It also grants me full oversight of your finances until the debt is cleared. Sienna gasped. Dad, we can't. You have 24 hours to sign it, I said, cutting her off. If you don't, I will be forced to take legal action to protect my financial interests. And believe me, Perry, you do not want me to do that. My voice was quiet, but it carried the weight of everything I now knew. They stared at me, then at the document. It wasn't a request. It was a declaration of war. I had them, and they knew it. I turned and walked out of the apartment without another word, leaving them in the ruins of their own making. I spent the evening in Martha's garden pruning the roses. The simple, methodical work calmed my nerves. At 9 p.m., I went to a late movie, a calculated move to give them time. I knew desperate people made desperate choices. I just wanted to see how desperate they had become. When I returned home just after midnight, the house was dark and silent, but the moment I stepped inside, I felt it. A subtle shift in the air. A wrongness. I turned on the hall light. Nothing seemed out of place. I walked into the living room, then the kitchen. Everything was as I had left it. But my study was different. The door was closed, when I always left it open. I pushed it open slowly. The room was neat, almost too neat. My banker's eye for detail screamed that something was wrong. A book on the shelf was tilted at a slightly different angle. The pen on my desk blotter was parallel to the edge, not perpendicular. My gaze went to the center drawer of my desk. I pulled it open. The manila folder containing the loan documents was still there, but it felt thinner. I opened it. The mortgage arrears, the credit card statements, they were all there. But the specific pages I had printed, the wire transfer records for Royal Spades International, were gone. They had broken into my home. My own daughter had stood by while her husband ransacked my private space, searching for the evidence of his crime. They hadn't just betrayed me. They had violated the sanctity of my home, the place I had shared with my wife for over 2 decades. The cold resolve in my chest burned away, replaced by a white-hot rage. My evidence was gone, but it didn't matter. They had just given me a new reason to bring them to ruin. I stood in the silence of my violated study. The physical proof of Perry's fraud was gone, reduced to ash or shredded paper. They thought they had outsmarted me. They thought that without that specific piece of paper, it was my word against theirs. They were wrong. They had taken my best weapon, so now I would use every other weapon in my arsenal. I sat down at my desk and pulled the remaining documents towards me. The picture was still damning. The defaulted loans, the maxed-out credit, the cascading debts. My original plan was still viable, but now it would be executed with zero mercy. My phone buzzed. A text from Sienna. Dad, we found a lovely assisted living place in Tempe. Much more appropriate than that big empty house. Can we schedule a tour tomorrow? The audacity was breathtaking. Less than 24 hours after breaking into my home, she was sending me condescending messages about my own eviction. They hadn't just destroyed the evidence, they felt emboldened by it. I deleted the message. It was time to remind them what a real threat looked like. Tuesday morning brought the call I'd been expecting. My coffee was still steaming when the phone rang. Sienna's name on the display. "Good morning, Sienna." "Dad?" Her voice carried an unfamiliar tremor. "I need to discuss something important with you. About our conversation Sunday." "Which part?" "Well, about the house situation and some financial concerns Perry and I are facing." "Financial concerns. Such delicate language." "Dad, we're going through a difficult period. We need help, just temporarily. $15,000 would get us back on track." $15,000. Not even enough to cover their mortgage payments, but a desperate stopgap. "No, Sienna." Silence stretched between us. "I'm sorry." "What?" I said, "No, I won't be lending you money." "Dad, I don't think you understand. This isn't for a vacation. We could lose our house." "I understand perfectly," I said, my voice as cold as the tile floor. "But you've always helped us. The college money, the wedding, you've always helped. Two $15,000 worth of help, to be precise. That was then." "Dad, what's wrong with you?" Panic crept into her voice. "This isn't like you. We're family." "Are we?" I asked. "Family doesn't break into each other's homes." Another silence, this one charged with guilt and fear. I don't know what you're talking about." "Don't you? Goodbye, Sienna." I hung up before she could respond. The phone immediately began ringing again. I turned off the ringer. My evidence might be gone, but their guilt was a weapon I could still use. Without the wire transfer records, proving Perry's fraud would be a long, difficult legal battle. I needed a faster, more direct approach. I needed leverage that couldn't be shredded or burned. Perry had cheated more people than just me. It was time to find them. My research led me to a man named Frank Gallo. He owned a small electrical subcontracting firm. Public records showed that Desert Vista Construction owed him $42,000, an unpaid invoice that had forced Frank to lay off half his crew. I found him at a dusty work site on the edge of Mesa. He was a broad-shouldered man in his 50s, with hands like worn leather and a wary look in his eyes. "You Frank Gallo?" I asked, stepping out of my car. He squinted at me, sizing me up. "Who's asking?" "My name is Harold Butler. I'm Perry Morgan's father-in-law." His expression hardened instantly. "Then you can get right back in your car and drive away. I've got nothing to say to anyone related to that crook." "He cost you $42,000, I stated. "He cost me more. I'm the one who co-signed the business loan he defaulted on." That got his attention. He wiped his brow with the back of a glove. "You're the money man? So this is your fault. You backed a snake." "I backed my daughter's husband," I corrected him. "A mistake I am now rectifying. Perry and my daughter are about to lose everything. When they do, I intend to control their finances. And when I do, I'll need to decide who gets paid back first." Frank stared at me, his hostility slowly giving way to cautious interest. "What are you proposing?" "I need information," I said. "You worked with Perry for over a year. You know how he operates. I need to know where the bodies are buried. What corners did he cut? What regulations did he ignore? I need things that city inspectors might find interesting." He laughed, a short, bitter sound. "You want dirt?" The man's whole operation was a mudslide. He used substandard wiring on the Camelback project. The plans called for 12-gauge copper. He used 14-gauge aluminum to save a few bucks. It's a fire hazard waiting to happen. This was exactly what I needed. "Can you prove it?" "I've got the original supply manifests and the change orders he faked. I kept everything, thinking I'd need it for court." "I have a better idea than court," I told him. I opened my briefcase on the hood of my car and showed him Perry's financial statements, The defaulted loans, the maxed out credit. This is a man on the verge of collapse. I don't want to sue him. I want to bankrupt him. I want to trigger a full-scale regulatory investigation that will shut him down for good. I looked him in the eye. Help me do that, and I give you my word. When I take control, your $42,000 invoice is the first one I pay. Frank was silent for a long moment, studying my face. He saw the same cold fury in me that was simmering in his own gut. He put my company on the line, he said finally. He lied to my face while he was driving his fancy truck. All right, Harold Butler. You've got a deal. Let's go burn him to the ground. Thursday morning brought me to Common Grounds Coffee Shop, a local favorite among banking professionals. I'd cultivated relationships here for 30 years. Margaret Walsh from First National slid into the booth across from me. Harold Butler, how are you holding up? Day by day, Margaret. Keeping busy helps. Speaking of keeping busy, we had an interesting application yesterday. Your son-in-law, Perry Morgan. I kept my expression neutral. High-risk case. Debt-to-income ratio approaching 60%. Recent business bankruptcy. We couldn't touch it. Family finances can be complicated, I offered. This went beyond complicated, she said, leaning forward. Between you and me, Harold, they're looking at foreclosure inside 2 weeks. After Margaret left, I sat finishing my coffee. Perry and Sienna were discovering that financial reputation, once damaged, couldn't be quickly repaired. Trust, like credit scores, took years to build and minutes to destroy. Driving home, I passed their apartment complex. Sienna's car sat in the lot, hood raised, steam rising from the engine. Another expense they couldn't afford. Friday evening brought the call I'd been waiting for. Harold. Perry's voice carried the strain of a week's worth of rejections. We need to talk. I'm listening. Look, I know we got off on the wrong foot Sunday. Maybe I was too direct. We're family, and families help each other. Is that what we are, Perry? Of course. Listen, we're in serious trouble. The banks won't work with us. We need $15,000, just temporarily. We'll sign papers, pay interest, whatever you want. As I recall, Perry, you told me to pack my suitcases and never come back. Silence. That was a misunderstanding. I was stressed. He then made his final, fatal mistake. Harold, please. Martha would have wanted you to help us. She loved Sienna. She wouldn't want to see us lose our home. They were using my dead wife as leverage. The audacity was almost admirable. Martha's gone, Perry. I make my own decisions now. What's happened to you? His voice pitched higher. This is about Sunday, isn't it? I apologize. I was wrong. I should never have suggested you leave your own house. Your apology is noted. Then you'll help us? No. The line exploded. Why not? You have the money. What's $15,000 to you? I think our conversation is finished. Wait, Harold, just tell me why. What did we do to deserve this? They'd calculated my grief as weakness, my love as vulnerability. They'd committed fraud and then broken into my home. Perhaps you should ask yourself why your loan applications keep getting rejected, I said, and hung up the phone. Saturday was for strategy. Armed with Frank Gallo's documents, the faked invoices, the material manifests, a sworn affidavit about the substandard wiring, I had everything I needed. My next stop was a quiet meeting with Bob Henley, a former client who'd retired from the city planning department. The construction business is brutal right now, Bob mentioned over coffee. Half these small outfits are one project failure away from bankruptcy. I imagine permit compliance is crucial in that environment, I said. More than ever, one safety violation can shut down a project for weeks. The next morning, I composed a simple email to Bob. Bob, enjoyed our conversation. Thought you might find these industry compliance reports interesting, particularly the section on safety protocol violations and material specifications on municipal projects. Purely informational, of course. Attached was a professionally formatted report. It contained Desert Vista's public records of permit delays, combined with Frank's detailed, damning evidence of fraud and safety violations on the Camelback project. It was a regulatory time bomb, delivered directly to the people who held the detonator. Within a week, Desert Vista Construction would find themselves facing the kind of scrutiny that could shut down projects and drain cash reserves. Perry had threatened me. Now he'd learn what real power looked like. Monday brought the news I'd been waiting for. Perry's pickup truck sat in their driveway at 3:15 p.m., 2 hours earlier than his usual return. I watched from a distance as he sat motionless behind the wheel for nearly 10 minutes. When he finally emerged, his shoulders carried the defeated slump of a man whose world had just collapsed. The regulatory scrutiny I'd orchestrated had worked faster than expected. The Camelback project was shut down immediately pending a full safety investigation. Desert Vista, already on thin ice, had been forced into immediate layoffs. Perry was one of them. Tuesday morning arrived with Sienna's scream. I'd positioned myself at the neighborhood park, monitoring their house from a discreet distance. The sound cut through the desert air like breaking glass. Pure, anguished disbelief. Perry had finally confessed. The $78,000 in hidden debt, the bankruptcy filing, the cascade of lies. Sienna stormed outside, phone pressed to her ear. "Mom, I know it's early, but we need help." Her voice carried across the morning stillness. Serious help. Perry lost his job. And no, there's more. Much more. The day devolved into a frantic series of desperate calls and arguments. By evening, their fight had moved to the front porch, voices raised beyond any pretense of privacy. Standing in my own front yard, ostensibly watering Martha's roses, I could hear every bitter word. "You bankrupted us," Sienna's voice cracked. $78,000, Perry. How do you hide $78,000? I was trying to save the business. Our future. We lose the house in 6 days. 6 days, Perry. Your father could help us if he wanted to. One phone call and this whole nightmare disappears. Sienna's laugh held no humor. My father? You ordered him to pack his bags and never come back. You think he's forgotten that? The front door slammed. Sienna remained on the porch, sobbing into her hands. Phase 2 of my plan was complete. Wednesday evening brought the visitors I'd been expecting. Through my front window, I watched them approach, Sienna clutching Perry's arm for support, both moving with the defeated shuffle of people who'd run out of options. The doorbell rang once, a tentative, almost apologetic sound. I took my time answering. Dad. Sienna's eyes were red-rimmed from crying. Thank you for seeing us. Sienna, Perry. I stepped aside, allowing them entry but making no welcoming gestures. They followed me to the living room, where I took my customary chair. Martha's chair remained empty beside me. They perched on the edge of the couch like children called to the principal's office. Dad. We're in serious trouble. Sienna's composure cracked immediately. I know we made mistakes, said things we shouldn't have. Mistakes. I repeated the word with clinical precision. Interesting choice of terminology. Harold, I need to apologize. Perry's voice carried the strain of swallowed pride. What I said at dinner, that was completely inappropriate. I was stressed about our financial situation. You were stressed, I acknowledged. About what specifically? The question forced him to reveal weakness. $78,000, he finally admitted. And your employment situation? I lost my job, Monday. Construction industry problems. Dad, please, Sienna's voice broke. We lose the house in 5 days. You're all I have left since Mom died. She was invoking my dead wife's memory to leverage sympathy. What specifically are you asking me to do? Lend us money, Perry said quickly. $40,000 would cover the mortgage arrears and give us breathing room. And if I refuse? The question hung in the air like smoke. Then we lose everything, Sienna whispered. Our home, our marriage, our future. Before I consider your request, I said, turning from the window, I think you should understand exactly how you arrived at this moment. Very little of what's happened to you has been coincidental. I walked to my desk, opening the center drawer. I pulled out a thick manila folder and spread the timeline across the coffee table. Monday, March 18th. I visited Desert Community Bank. As co-signer on your loans, I had every legal right to review your financial status. Perry's face went pale. I laid out the credit reports, the default notices. But the most interesting thing I found was proof of wire fraud. Transfers from your business account to an offshore gambling site called Royal Spades International. Sienna gasped and looked at Perry, a new wave of betrayal washing over her face. You were gambling. Perry couldn't speak. He just stared at me with growing horror. That evidence, unfortunately, disappeared from my desk after someone broke into my house 2 nights ago. But it no longer mattered. You showed me how far you were willing to go. I moved to the next set of documents. The banking community in Scottsdale is remarkably interconnected. I shared legitimate concerns about your risk factors with my former colleagues. You blacklisted us, Perry choked out. I provided professional insight, I corrected him. Then I found a man named Frank Gallo. He was quite upset about the $42,000 you owe him. He was even more upset about the substandard aluminum wiring you used on the Camelback project. He provided me with all the proof I needed. You got me fired, Perry whispered. I ensured that regulatory authorities had complete information about potential public safety risks. Your problems were entirely your own doing. I pulled out the final document, my handwritten strategic timeline. Every phone call, every refusal, every coincidence was calculated. You planned all of this? Sienna's voice broke. From the moment Perry told me to pack my bags, yes. You redefined our relationship that Sunday evening. I simply acted accordingly. Perry lunged forward, grabbing the papers. You manipulative old... Careful, Perry. My voice carried steel. You're still in my house, requesting my help. Perry gathered the scattered papers with trembling hands, his face flushed with rage and humiliation. Sienna remained collapsed on the couch. These are my terms, I said, returning to my chair with the calm authority of complete victory. You wanted assistance. Let's discuss it properly. What do you want? Perry asked through gritted teeth. First, a written apology. A public acknowledgement that your treatment of me was inappropriate and cruel. You'll submit it to the neighborhood newsletter and post it on your social media accounts. You want us to humiliate ourselves publicly, he snarled. I want you to correct the record. Your neighbors watched you disrespect a grieving widower. They should know you recognize that behavior was unacceptable. Sienna nodded slowly, tears streaming down her face. Okay, we'll write it. Second, you will treat me with the respect appropriate for the family patriarch. No more dismissive comments. No more financial presumptions. Perry nodded, his jaw tight. Third, any assistance comes with conditions. You'll attend marriage counseling. You'll follow my financial guidance. And Perry will find employment that I approve of. You want to control our lives, he said. I want to ensure my investment isn't wasted on people who haven't learned from their mistakes. I walked to my desk and pulled out my checkbook. I'm prepared to provide $25,000, enough to prevent foreclosure and give you breathing room to rebuild your lives properly. But we need $40,000, Sienna pleaded. You need to learn the difference between rescue and assistance. I'm not restoring your previous lifestyle. I'm preventing total collapse. I tore off the check and set it on the coffee table. This comes with monthly progress reports, financial transparency, and respectful communication. If you refuse these terms, you can leave my house and solve your problems alone. The silence stretched for nearly a minute. We accept, Sienna said finally. All of it. I picked up the check and held it just beyond their reach. You'll have this tomorrow, after you've submitted the public apology. Consider tonight your opportunity to reflect on how dramatically your circumstances have changed. I walked them to the door. One final thought, I said as they stepped onto the porch. You assumed I was weak because I was grieving. You confused kindness with stupidity and patience with powerlessness. Perry turned back, his face twisted with impotent rage. This isn't over, Harold. You're absolutely right, I said, a faint smile on my lips. It's not over, it's just beginning, under new management. I closed the door, the sound echoing in the quiet hall. Justice, I discovered, was a dish best served systematically. If this story resonated with you, leave a like and consider subscribing. You can also drop any comment below, even just one word. Maybe tell me where you're watching from, or what time it is right now. Sometimes one word is enough to say you were here.